Hello, everybody. Back again on YouTube. We managed to finish the hackathon and the party, and we are quite in a good mood. And we are now happy to introduce to you Jacqueline Klusig-Eckert and Peter Bell from the FAU, the Friedrich Alexander University of Erlangen, to tell us more about the time machine and whatever they want to talk to us. And we enjoy it and have your questions on the chat, in the chat room, or for the F&A down. Thank you very much. See you later.
Okay, then I'm going to start. I share the slides. Peter is going to start with the first part, and I jump in the second part.
Yeah, thank you for the opportunity to speak to you here and to finish this hackathon somehow. Yeah, as you already have heard, we want to present the European time machine and also our regional focus on it. You can go on the next. But we just want to use the opportunity for a bit of advertisement. So we are joining the time machine because we do digital humanities in Erlangen-Nuremberg, and we have the IZ Digital, an interdisciplinary research network from which we have now a BA and a MA program in digital humanities to just give you also the context why we are so interested in that topic and how we do that in place in Erlangen. So this network also is together with this group, which is joining the Time Machine Consortium. Next, perhaps. Yeah, and the Bachelor and Master of Digital Humanities is a bit special that there are not so many BA programs by now. And another specialty of Erlangen is that we have humanities and social sciences in this BA, and then the master is digital humanities. But I think that is the most I want to say. On the next slide, you also will see that we have a strong focus also on image and media, where also Jacqueline and I stand for a bit. And that it's somehow true digital humanities, so you get a deep insight into computing and into not only using tools, but also knowing the methods and really have hands-on digital humanities. It's skill-orientated and very related to practice, as I already mentioned with that hands-on. So, but let's start now with the talk. We have two main topics, the European time machine and the Nuremberg time machine. So I will do this European part, and Jacqueline will show this regional focus. Also the local time machines, the so-called local time machines, are kind of regional branches of the European time machine. And so we have these two parts. Next, perhaps. Yeah, what fascinates and connects Ubisoft, the makers of Assassin's Creed, the Louvre, Flixbus, AI Labs, and various state archives at the same time? This is the Time Machine project. And here you see the web space of the Time Machine where you can get further information. We just jump in the consortium. So next. Since 2016, the Time Machine Consortium is constantly growing. The epicenter in the beginning had been the EPFL in Lausanne, but now it is represented in over 30 countries all over Europe and abroad. The idea and nucleus of the Time Machine is digital humanities, but it is digital humanities in the broadest sense, including CLAM, industry, and very advanced computer science groups. So this group is not only big and international, but also highly interdisciplinary. And although it had already been funded by the EU for 1 year to create a roadmap, the initiative has still the spirit of a grassroots movement where everybody can join. So you all are invited to support. There are very different ways of support, affiliation and membership in this project, and the new founded Time Machine organization is also some kind of alternative way of structuring the whole thing and being the infrastructure behind this initiative. Yeah, more information you find on the page. Yeah, and as you see, European institutions, civil society, it already has a very strong connection also to politics and citizen science and a lot of associations. So it's really on many layers, a network which is far more than just research. Next, please. Yeah, the second fascination of the time machine is its scope. A longue durée of many thousand years of history should be tackled with the same workflow, the same tools and standards. So it is also an opportunity to streamline many ambitions in the digital humanities and the field of cultural heritage and CLAM, of course. This process starts with the digitization itself and the improvement of digitization to reach a larger scale. It takes new ways in simulating the past via machine learning. And besides this technical and scholarly challenge, it also claims to make the data public. Time Machine wants to make history available and tangible for everyone. So we have also to deal with these right issues and really have to work out a solution where all these stakeholders can say yes to a public access, and also different models of access in this data. So next. So let's illustrate that a bit. The time machine idea can be seen in the context of a mirror world and a digital twin. We want to give a representation of the world a bit like the Internet Archive. Next. In the Internet Archive, you can go back in the past and see how a web page changes over the time. And you also see distinctive events where something happens. Next. In the same way, the time machine should use our backup for the past, documents and other objects of cultural heritage to reconstruct the past and make it possible to navigate through different events, stages, and periods. Next. So the goal is not only a 3D simulation of the past, but a 4D with the time as an important dimension. A simple tagline for that is also Google of the past, but not only the search engine, but also Google World with its 3D representation of the world. In the time machine, you should navigate, slide, and zoom in 4 dimensions. Jacqueline, perhaps we go back to the last slide again for a moment. Please mention these small cards at the visualization. It is important to understand that the time machine is more than a 3D reconstruction of buildings. It contains a semantic graph which organizes the historical information in space and time. The city reconstructions are the visual tip of the iceberg through which you should dive into the historical data. One exemplary entrance to open the graph. So there will be also other entrances to dig into the data. Now, next. Yeah, this you already see. The time machine is an ecosystem. Yeah, perhaps that one, yeah. Coordinated by the Time Machine organization in collaboration with partners like Europeana, museums, and libraries to enrich, provide, and communicate the big data of the past. Also, it's a bit like an oil field, and all these different things you have to do afterwards For this, the partners develop hardware, tools, and workflows, which are here summarized as the Time Machine box. Besides the central collecting point, there is a network of local time machines. At the moment, these are sandboxes and showcases where researchers autonomously experiment how time machines can look like and share these experiences with the public and in the consortium. Next. The detail. Can I have?
Do you want to have this one with all the smart city?
The detail, the detail one.
This one.
Okay. I think I don't need to explain how important augmented and virtual reality are for that concept. Especially augmented reality makes it possible to experience history by walking through a city. Instead, I want to exemplify a bit more on the role of artificial intelligence, machine learning, and big data. The first challenge is to generate representative historical big data, also good data, so to say. There's an analog historical big data by now, but the selective way of digitization is a huge bias, and a lot of data is needed to use deep learning effectively. No, the video, yeah. Yeah, what we see here soon, I hope it works. Yeah, you see that timeline with all the significant periods. And what you see now is, we wait a moment, this is what we call the information mushroom, what we now have as digital information. And you see that it really gets smaller and smaller through time. And what we want to do is now to digitize massively so that this mushroom can get bigger in the middle, that we get more information. And when you go on, yeah, it's not so easy to do that together. So
yeah, because I can see not, we were here, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah, and the next step, which is now coming in, is just summarized to simulation. But what happens here is that all the data we have is compared and analyzed, and then with the results of that is concluded simulations, which could really give a better and denser sense of the past. Next. Yeah, this was the vision. And of course, this is a roadmap for at least 10 years of research. So I want to pick out what tasks the FAU has identified and is already working on. The first thing is method. Working with big data changes the method from historians and scholars in the humanities in general. You know, for example, the concept of distance seeing in digital humanities. What I want to show you here is a comparison with art. Normally, the traditional scholar is a painter, working from zero, from the white canvas, and then add an own corpus by collecting data, reading literature, and then coming slowly to an own argumentation step by step. The new approach on the other side is like the stone. It's comparable to a sculpture, starting from the whole and forming the results out of that whole. But also the concept of the local time machines show that we also work bottom up too. So we are starting at one point, we're starting at one city. So we have to synthesize these traditional additive humanities approach with a subtractive data science method, kind of both directions. yeah, here you just see how that works, and how we have to somehow connect these two directions of people working on different spaces and this whole data which is collected in this time machine box somehow. Okay, just to showcase some of the projects we already have. In the left corner, you see Andreas Meyer, one of the steering committee members of the Time Machine and also professor at the FAU for pattern recognition and artificial intelligence. And what this group did is they scanned a book without opening it. So you have this medical method of going through the book, and then the challenging part is to reconstruct every page, because you see that this page somehow has wave. Every page has waves, so every page has to be reconstructed via computer vision. And so, because of the different chemistry between the inks and the paper, you can reconstruct the letters of every page, and you see how that works for these different inks. And also in my group, we do computer vision to compare images, to really make huge amounts of images accessible by similarity, and to, for example, find portraits or other objects by just comparing the visual patterns. And in the whole project, we will interlink these visual approaches together with natural language processing to really get the best out of metadata and the objects itself. Next. Yeah, and here you see the whole space of different local time machine. You see that they have very different periods of interest, and you see that it's also different cities, but still mostly these are the cities with a long history, with a long, with still big importance, and which are very visible in tourism and everything. What we hope is that we also get a lot of local time machines which are a bit perhaps neglected today, but which have a very prominent past, and which tackle other questions besides this very central cities we have here. Yeah, and now I want to give it over to Jacqueline, who will present the Nuremberg Time Machine as one example of a time machine.
Yeah. Okay, the Nuremberg Time Machine. As a local laboratory for experimenting and prototyping, the Nuremberg Time Machine focuses on the complete metropolitan region of Nuremberg, so it's not just a city. Of course, Nuremberg as a formal imperial city gets a lot of our attention, but history, or better to say, several narratives of history, does not stop at city limit. We aim not to replicate outdated models of historiography, like the comparison of cultural center or something like the underdeveloped periphery. The Nuremberg Time Machine does not only focuses on art either, or on archival material. It understands the history of that region as a dense network of interacting components. And there are connections between buildings, historical persons, or still active traditions and rituals, even it is not possible to us. That's why many people are not yet aware of those connections. The Time Machine aims to make these connections, the networks of relations, explicit. However, you must be kind of patient till you understand the connection of these images of a romantic cathedral, of one of the oldest carnival rituals, the Schembadlauf, a Baroque ceiling, a football stadium of the Chlorreichen, or a bunch of Nazis in a Wagner opera. Why? Because we just started. I would love to show you a prototype or even a well-structured data model, but at this moment, I'm able to present you the work in progress. I'm going to show you our vision of the Nuremberg Time Machine and introduce you to our theoretical concept. At the local time machine, we work, but I started another way. And the local time machines in general work in an individual way. As laboratories, they do the testing and the forward-thinking approaches for the big data of the past. The pilot, the Venice time machine, focuses on archival materials and land registry documentation. The Amsterdam time machine, which is a hub of several projects, mainly focuses on data and maps. Or the Sion time machine, which just started last year, is focusing on reconstruction of lost cultural heritage. And now it's a question, what will we do? The Nuremberg time machine decided to focus on objects. And I'm going to show you why. Just look at this petroleum lamp. At the first glimpse, it seems just like an old lamp, an uninteresting object to us. So the first level, the visual effect is just a lamp. But with more information about your object, you're getting feelings for it. You get in contact with it. It is over 80 years old, way much older than you are. And what story could it tell if it could talk? This object belongs to the Familie König and came from Serbia to Franconia. So it had a long distance of traveling. Now, are you a bit interested in? And this lamp brings light in dark years. It has a story which is closely connected to the family König, which had to leave their farm on the 8th of October 1943 due to the Nazi regime. And the family had to travel with the horses and this tiny lamp from Serbia to Franconia. On that way, the mother, Katharina König, survived with her children, but they lost their father. Now you have a feeling for this lamp. You have a contact to this object. And after it arrived in Abenberg, it moved to the Franconian Freiland Museum, where they took care of it and its history. Just think about it. Objects and any kind of things made by humans live longer than humans did. We know about the Venus of Willendorf, which is over 30,000 years old. They traveled through time and space. Objects of our cultural heritage are the real time travelers. And compared to the time travelers we know from movies or science fiction, those time travelers are real. But other than Marty McFly, they can just travel forward in time, or like Keanu Reeves. But in the end, all of them need a time machine, except of Keanu Reeves. I don't know how he's doing it. And of course, I'm just kidding. Nevertheless, this image helps me to concretize the metaphor of time traveling objects. Back to the time machine. We are going to focus on the objects and trace their movements through time and space. Some were born in Nuremberg, left it, came back. Other travels to Nuremberg, stayed there. And with them, as an invisible backpack, they carry stories. They are carriers of their own biography, sometimes visible through marks or any other signs of aging, but they bring also stories of people, places, and other objects that traveled with them through time. So when we speak about objects, what do we mean exactly? To be honest, no, I stay here. To be honest, everything human made which survived, those Maria Condors of history, the objects are still there. It doesn't matter if they bring joy or not. The scope goes from shoes to tools, from paintings to fountains, everything which you can imagine, even old ugly lamps. But how do we call them if we are in the completely, sometimes virtual digital time machine? How can we make a data model without specifying about what we are talking? It is important to clarify. We need to define these terms, and this is the question, a rough question for us right now. When we look at research papers about this issue, you can find several simultaneously used terms. Found digital, digitized, virtualized, or virtual objects, or digital objects, copies, facsimiles, digital surrogates, or even inspired by the terminology of Internet of Things, the digital twin. But there is no interdisciplinary convention when it comes to name the results of the digital transformation. So how should we call these things, those bit streams which appear to us on the screen? The usage of these terms and their semantic content depend from the scientific field where they're used. Nevertheless, we can find most of the time, digital object, sometimes digital copy. So when you start with philosophy, it goes back to Aristoteles, and the question of subject and thing goes to Kant till you reach Heidegger, but this keynote is too short for theoretical excursions. As a practicer, you can say, scan it, measure it, and now you have a digital object. Or, this would be the easiest way, everything which can have a DOI as a digital object. Or everything which can be formalized, or every bit stream with a proper metadata. But when it comes to the Nuremberg time machine, we are going to use the same word, digital object, in different use cases. It's not getting easier. On the one hand, for technical infrastructure, as computer scientists, we use the digital object for DOI or the bitstream thing. But on the other hand, as humanists and culture studies scholars, we think about artifacts and historiographic objects. And to explain you this scope of the term and what we mean by that, I make a tiny jump to another platform to show you this. Now here, just a sec. We are here in the Miro, our whiteboard where we create ideas. And as I told you, I'm going to throw you in our work in progress. Here you can see as an example, the shrine of San Sebaldus, Sebalsgrab, the patron of Nuremberg. He is closely connected as the shrine to the city itself. The shrine carries the coat of arms of the city. And this object is also connected to Johann Wolfgang von Goethe. You don't believe me? I will show it to you. The shrine is made by the famous brass workshop of Peter Fischer and his son in 500 years ago. And art historians of the last 100 centuries thought about the questions like, who did what? Is this shrine Middle Age or already Renaissance? Why there are so many snails on it? How the heck did they make this beautiful thing? Is it so heavy? How did they move it? Questions like this concerning to the historical object. Question and several hypotheses as well as answers of the discussion belongs to the historical object, but would belong to the digital object too after the transformation. So during the last 500 years, the shrine for himself had several experiences. Some of them are visual at the object itself. Others can be just traced back in written sources. And now it's getting complicated. For example, there were some events in the 17th century where the pastor of St. Sebald Church decided to change the silver plaquettes, the silver work on the shrine because people tried to steal that. But he didn't melt those silver to make something new. He stored it. And in the 19th century, the silver was brought to the Germanisches Nationalmuseum in Nuremberg, where they become a new inventory number and an own historical object. So what can we do when we digitize it? On the one hand, we have the shrine, and on the other hand, we had stuff which was the shrine, but isn't the shrine anymore, and became a new historical object. So shall we handle it as a new digital object, or is it still the same? You know where I want to go to with these questions. But there are other things. In the 19th century and all over the time, we had something which we called reception phenomena. And those reception means that a lot of people, artists, travelers, try to make new art or try to documentate the shrine. So it's getting more and more complicated. For example, when we started with the early reception, we found a lot of prints trying to put the shrine into the legend of the San Sebaldus or try to document the shrine in early copper prints. In the 19th century, we have a lot of individual redos, like tiny drawings or copies made by artists, or historiographic interpretations of the shrine and the story, how it was built. But with all those pieces of reception, we have new digital objects which are connected to artists, to stories, to their networks. So now you see where the graph is opening. And especially in the 19th century, it was really popular to have one of the tiny apostle figures which is on the shrine. So a lot of copies were made. A huge copy of the complete shrine is in the Victoria and Albert Museum, but tiny shrines can be found everywhere. And this is where Goethe comes to us. And like I promised, in his journal, we can find a note where he asked a friend in Nuremberg to bring one of those exquisite copies. So not only Goethe, who collected kind of everything, wants to have it or handles with this altar, there were also Schinkel in Berlin or Thorvaldsen in Denmark who were inspired by the figures in the 19th century. The figures itself, the apostles, became an aesthetic ideal. So let's scroll to the distance to see why we are still handling with it. Even with simple models or just when you want to think about how you would structure that, the complexity of cultural reception is so huge, so fast, and it's getting even more and more complicated when we look at nowadays, where people still take photographs of it, post it on Instagram, or creating new pieces of art inspired by the shrine. How can we model this? Now I go back to the Google presentation, but unfortunately, I do not have an answer yet. Just an idea how we will bring all of this together. A question which is still in our mind is, where does one digital object begins and where does it end? The digital object begins normally with the process of digitization. While on the technical point of view, a JPEG or a scan can already be a digital object, it means just the visual digitized representation of the original object, the real object, one piece to the puzzle when it comes to the digital. Another piece is knowledge about the object, everything we know and the reception. And this can be digitized by metadata models. The shrine as an artifact of interest can be transformed into processional information as every collectible. We have a lot of examples for that already. It can become, it becomes a unique identifier and can be described, and all the physical information can be described by measuring, weighting, seeing, heights, material, weight, and so on. In addition to that, we clue, or better to stick digitized versions as images or 3D scans to it, which have them for themselves a bunch of metadata. And on the next level, we add history. But how can we bring this into the Time Machine cloud? The answer is as easy as complicated. We have to model it, and we use it a knowledge graph. And for that, we're going to use our tool Whisky, which is invented in Erlangen and at the Germanisches Nationalmuseum in Nuremberg. But how will people, the users of the Time Machine, are going to find everything again? We open it up in a knowledge base. And how will this information to other collections about the shrine link to our graph? We make the data as interoperable as possible. For that reason, we are going to integrate as much standard vocabulary and linked open data rules to that. Besides GND, Lido, and CDOC CRM, metadata standards, and ontologies for people or artifacts, we also put in the structure of Wikidata, the linked open data vocabularies, and other important things. This integration and interoperability cannot be made manually, of course. We do not have just one shrine in Nuremberg. Due to the help of automatically processes, computer vision, natural language processing, in short, with the help of machine learning, we can connect the data to achieve knowledge. Our aim is to model not only the object as it is at the moment right now, we are going to include the discourse, the chances, the travelings during the time, the biography of the object as well, as you saw earlier, the 4D model of the time machine. And now you might think, well, a lot of efforts with the benefit to makes it easier for researchers. But this is not our aim, not only. The Nuremberg Time Machine will not be just a fancy tool for scientists. We team up with the city of Nuremberg, who is preparing an application for becoming the European capital 2025. And the Time Machine is one of the flagship projects. Together with CLAM, creatives, and the citizens themselves, we are going to pass forward the official claim of the application. The aim is clear. We do not want to tell the same old stories about Nuremberg again. No historical revisionism or neo-historism, no social exclusion. We have a vision of the metropolitan region Nuremberg as a network of cultural exchange. And as you can see in a network analysis of last year of the cultural cooperation, there are already a lot of network connections, and we need some effort to make them explicit. As part of the Fast Forward project, the Nuremberg Time Machine will not only be the technical infrastructure. We understand it as a service hub for citizen scientists, teachers, tiny private collections, and connect them to the digital sphere. The main keyword are capacity building and helping with the digital transformation and teaching digital literacy. We aim to empower the citizens of the metropolitan region to take part in their own history and how the story is going to be told. Of course, as a university, we are looking forward to develop, use, and maintain new technologies, but every coin has two sides. What are these technologies there for if nobody is going to use them? So we bring the data to the people. Several events like Scanathon parties, datatons, hackathons can be a low threshold entry into the digital. This direct approach enables the general public to make their own data for the time machine, to tell their stories. With exhibitions and interactive as well as participative events and artistic interventions, we show what we do with the data in a non-digital way. It is important to track the knowledge out of the black box. We need to show and present the gaining of insights. And just to add this briefly, we have to get them inspired by data. If we empower the public by building user-friendly interfaces, transparent knowledge base, and showing a responsible handling of data, we can give them a secure open space for own experiments, for real participation. It is about capacity building to enable people and objects to tell their own diverse stories, to show the diverse narratives of history. The time machine is not a one-way street. It is not a gatekeeping of knowledge. We have the possibility to build a time machine, to making big data of the past. And I would like to end with a principle that comes in my mind when I think about the challenging task to make a time machine. With great power comes great responsibility, and we are responsible for our cultural heritage and the time-traveling objects. Thank you.
Thank you, Jacqueline. Wonderful. You wiped away all my questions with your last sentences. But maybe you have some other questions on the chat in the meanwhile, until I find a new one. And Franziska is asking, how do you intend to tackle the historical gender bias and gender gap? Would a simulation of existing bias data not perpetuate this gap? I just read it again because you already answered, Peter. On
Yeah,
the
but
chat,
I can answer it.
Not everybody can see the chat, that's why.
Okay. Yes, thank you for the question. I think it's a very important question, and bias is really a big topic in all our research, because it comes from in several stages. What we can, we can try to reduce this bias, but of course we aim to reduce the historiographical bias. For example, when 19th century art historians didn't mention female artists of the 16th century or something like that. of course, we can't reduce the historical bias of gender, less power and things like that. There we can only perhaps push some biography stories or objects which have perhaps a female context. And of course, this bias is not only about gender, it's also about post-colonial political issues and classism. So we really have to keep that in mind. Thank you for that question. And yeah, this is also a big challenge.
Yeah, it's a big challenge for a lot of projects, not only for yours, and there is no solution. So it's just to reduce the possibility that it's too much biased. But anybody else who wants to ask a question? There is still an audience, even if we are quite late, and it's the 4th day actually of Hackathon, a conference and Hackathon of the Exchange Reality. But probably something comes up. Let's wait a bit.
Maybe just to add this, to add to this, we're thinking a lot about the Canaan, because in the last 10 or 20 years, when it comes to huge digitization projects, they always asked, what is the most important thing to digitize? But for us, the most important thing is not the most important, because we already know a lot or kind of anything about it. More important are the things which aren't digitized yet. Things or information which hides in the depots of museum, which they are kind of afraid to show or embarrassed why they have this. This is more interesting. Or as I said in the beginning of this week, I'm living at the countryside. It's a 2,000 people village, and there isn't a village archive. There's just one guy who's collecting all the images, all the old letters from the really old people, like the 90s or 80s-year-old, which think their children aren't interested in their old stuff. And they give this to this one man. So he is the archive. But what happens if this one man isn't anymore? He cannot give it to an archive in Nuremberg because they don't collect this stuff. It's not interesting for them. They do not have enough room to space that. So it would be really good to have the possibility for those people to have the support for this knowledge and these kinds of historical documentation.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. There's also another comment of Wolfgang. He says, first he says, great talk, great initiative. What portals do you envision to experience the contents of the time machine? Who wants to answer? Maybe both.
Yeah. Of course, there are already partners who may host and provide part of the outcomes of Time Machine. That is, for example, Europeana, which with we closely work together. As Jacqueline said, we really appreciate open data, and so we will also use the whole wiki universe, like Wikidata, for example, so that there is also an easy way to get this data and also a lot of visibility. But of course, these, as we have shown, and I think this slide was a bit underestimated in our talk, is that it is also connected to a lot of markets, to creative industry, to tourism, to education. And we also hope that on this edge, we have a lot of production of apps. Also, I think the best example was this very prominent idea of the Rijksmuseum to give everything away, its whole data, and then this whole creative industry made the portal itself, because there was a lot of new products which just use that material, and the material get visible by these objects. So that would be a second talk, how we can also produce objects which trace to history.
He continues to ask it, like it seems that there is a lot of focus on qualitative data semantics. What about more quantitative data? Is there a way or format to store, for example, measurements?
At the moment, we are researching on methods how to handle messy big data. But for doing that in a better way, we need massive big data. So this is now for us as a team the first step. We're convincing institutions to give us their data, which can be as messy as it can, and then we try to develop methods to get anything out of that, to interpret that.
Yeah, perhaps to add, I think the question was also about that, especially with that Trine, and we showed very qualitative objects. But by using all these data science models, I would say quantitative things are really more applicable for them. So of course, we also every quantitative information we have, and which with we can also have results, for example, very usual thing, number of inhabitants through time, and also economic data, which is quantifiable. I think that it's really even more it's easier to use machine learning for these sphere than to do qualitative objects with it. So that's why we focused in the talk mainly on that, because that is for us the challenge. But of course, as we talk about big data, it's always about the whole. It's always about quantitative approaches and objects and qualitative.
And maybe another question. I have another one. So we always talk about preserved data or cultural data in the past, and we try to keep it and keep it alive. But what about the data? We have heard a talk in midday by kind of artists, and they're creating some data. So how can this be? Maybe it's a vision for the future, I don't know. But what about the data we are now producing? How
The only data we're producing right now is this stream. The data they produced, it's already history.
Yeah.
Yeah, I showed this example of the Internet Archive and the Wayback Machine, and it shows that it can be somehow simple to work with the data we now produce if we take the effort to back it up. What we normally don't do because it's all commercial, and then Yahoo gets bankrupt, for example, and then all this data vanishes. But at the end, it would be simple to start with a time machine until from today.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there are a lot of ambitions to have something like that. But having this consortium with a lot of historians who always look far into the past, that is not our main topic, but it can be a side project. And I think in this discussion of mirror world and digital twin, this is something we really should integrate in the time machine as well.
Jacqueline, yes.
It wasn't the last. It was the Time Machine conference in Lausanne, where they showed a 3D movie, and we're thinking about how to preserve this, like digital born objects. And there are already some local time machines who are focusing on digitization and preserving like digital art or digital born art, AI art right now. but that comes with other questions of how the computer is going to evolve. If we do that, what kind of emulation do we need to see it in the same way as we saw it some years ago, and so on and so on.
Yeah, and it's also the question of product, because what we have seen midday is also a kind of product. But I'm also thinking about what is culture right now. And you talked about that there's the people should get involved, the inhabitants of Nuremberg and so on. So it's a maybe this kind of hacking practice is also kind of culture. So this participation, what we talked also on Monday. So on Monday we had this discussion about digital humanities, or the digitaler humanismus or whatever, and it came up that it's very important to have a participatory design, and what we did also during the hackathon. So maybe this is a kind of culture what we have now. It was not 500 years ago, but maybe how can we make it visible maybe for the future, or to... Do you have any ideas? It's just...
Yeah, I think what we also want to reach in this project with a cultural capital and other citizen science approaches is really to empower the public to save their own data, and already then it gets a much more a shorter time span, because you may be interested in digitizing things from your grandparents and from yourself. Also, for example, where yourself, as we right now, have the feeling now something very special is happening. And I don't mean the hackathon, but Corona in general, but also this this thing that you perceive something at the moment which is somehow history already, and to give these people this possibility, to empower them to use these tools and to make these tools simple enough or also shareable enough that a community can use them is part of the game, and this really would help us to have this backup of the past in the future, I think.
So documentary as well. Okay.
Yeah.
I would say if there is not coming up any other question, I would like to thank you very much.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah.
Thank you, Jacqueline, also for your participation, because you really did a great job 4 days like we did. You stayed.
Everybody did.
Yeah, but you stayed with us all the time. And Peter, thank you very much for coming right now, and maybe have you with us in person, both of you, next time. Yeah, so we leave you off of the podium. Thank you, Wolfgang, for your question, and Franziska, and maybe Franziska and Thomas are joining me right now on the podium for the closing.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Peter.
Thank you.
So, still waiting for Thomas.
No, I'm here.
Hi. So we do it the other way around, as we opened the conference and the hackathon. So it's up to me first. Dear joiners, listeners, and contributors, 6 awesome groups could achieve to have an awesome outcome. So I'm really proud of each group, each person, because there are 40 people.
Okay, now she dropped out. Should we jump in between?
Yes, maybe.
Okay, maybe let me continue, and once Silvia shows up again, then she's coming actually. Silvia, are you here?
Yes.
Yes, you need to unmute yourself, please. Silvia.
And it always happens.
Silvia?
Yes.
Welcome back.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, we can hear you. Perfect.
Yes, yes. we
Should I
can hear you.
continue or you want to continue?
No, please go on.
No,
Okay.
no.
So 6 awesome groups could achieve have really cool outcomes, and I'm really proud of each person who stayed here 3-4 days, whatever it took them. We had a lot of energy, competences, and knowledge to share between the participants, between us, yeah, we could experience how interdisciplinary collaboration can work at its best, I would say. It was a kind of experience also how a hackathon will work out online and also a conference and all together. So there was once the question of the technique. So we really thank David Rüttler and Alexandra Riffler for this really fantastic and wonderful support. Thank you for being with us.
Perhaps you can show up briefly, David and
Yes,
Alexandra,
please
so
show
that all of the
yourself.
people can
Yes.
also see you.
So, maybe Alexandra, you're fine. David? No, I think doesn't hear us. So, but Alexandra, you have to take now all congratulations and share with
Our gratitude.
our gratitude, our everything. Thank you. It was really a good job.
Yeah, we could not have not have done it without you. It's
Definitely not.
yeah.
So, and
You are
thanks to each participant.
muted, actually.
Alexandra wants to say something.
Yes,
Yes.
I will tell it, David, also. Yes,
Thank
Yeah.
you very much.
for him here.
That's the most important thing, to have strong people on the backside of that. Yeah, thanks again to each participant to join and contribute. And without them, there wouldn't be any hackathon. So we think also thank the province of Lower Austria for their great funding and their trust in us. And Icarus, of course. Icarus is part of this time machine project. Thank you for your network, for your support, for your trust, for your infrastructure. And Thomas Eigner for the opening as a representative of Icarus, the International Center of Archival Research. And we also thank the city of St. Pölten once again, and of course the Smart Hub initiative of St. Pölten. The last thing I have to say, two things, I'm sorry. I want to emphasize on two highlights. It was the facing of challenges and the participatory design, what we really could experience through these days, all of us, not only the participants of the hackathon, because we faced the challenge, because the future is changing. And I think it was a great success. We learned a lot for the future, and I hope everybody found his space. And yes, I think it was a really great effort for the whole community. And so, last but not least, thanks to my co-hosts Thomas and Franziska for carrying out and preparing this event. It was the best practice of collaboration ever. So I hand over now to you.
Okay. Thank you, Silvia. So let me start with the topic you ended with. So we also want to thank you, Silvia, for first of all, for sure, the organization of the hackathon, but also for the organization of the whole event, because without you, this event wouldn't have been possible, not only for us, but for all of us actually. From the beginning on, still when we thought that the event would be really a physical event at our university, from the beginning on, and we started planning this actually, when was it? Last autumn, I would say, approximately.
Summer, autumn.
So since then, without you, this wouldn't have been possible. And there's no way of giving you real flowers right now. So we give you virtual flowers, and we do not send them via post, because most likely they will not get to you. But we will make some personal celebration once we're allowed to meet in person again, which will be soon, hopefully. Thank you, Silvia. To follow up on this, I would like to give you some information about the conference part, which was organized by Franziska and me. So we had the last 3.5 days, we had actually 3 paper presentation sessions in the early afternoon each day. We had 8 very interesting presentations from really different topics. So we had on the first day, we had XR for museums and archives. On the second day, we had XR for industry and healthcare. And today we had XR for artistic research and animation. And all of the papers were great in their particular domain. So it was really a nice event for us. And we also want to thank for sure all of the authors for contributing to our conference. Just to let you know, the proceedings of this conference session will be published open access. We will manage to do this hopefully in the next weeks, and we will send out the link to this publication to all of you. I would also like to say a brief thank you to our sponsors. So Silvia mentioned already a lot of them. I want to add with saying thank you to the Mechatronics cluster of the EcoPlus business agency of Lower Austria, who also supported our event. And before I hand over to Franziska, I want to make a very brief advertisement for what's coming up in autumn. So in the end of November, actually in the last week of November, we will have the International Conference on Media Technology, the so-called ICON CMT at our university. And we talked about this already in some sessions. So there will most likely be an Open Glam session being a part of this ICON CMT event, again organized together with Silvia. So we will update you on this, so stay tuned. And what I also said in the opening of the conference, so for this event there was actually a third part planned originally. So this would have been a demos and poster session, which in our opinion didn't make any sense to be only a virtual event. So we are already planning for this to take place also in autumn. So stay tuned. And thank you once again from my side for taking part. It was really a nice experience for us. Actually, it was my first only virtual conference to organize. So also a lot of stuff to learn for me and for us. And with this, I would like to give the last words to my colleague Franziska.
Yeah. So thank you, Thomas. Thank you, Silvia. I also want to thank my co-hosts, especially Silvia, because you are one of the persons who has only big ideas and is planning something, but also following through it in a very intense and also very productive and fruitful way. And it was a pleasure to work with you. And I'm sure we will find a way to work again. And follow up this event or something else. Of course, also with Thomas, it's very nice and always to work with us. We also had a lot of fun to organize this, lots of jokes going around. And yes, I mean, we had these questions in mind. How can augmented virtual mixed reality help us to address current issues and challenges and find solutions for the future? And as I said in the beginning, I think this was the perfect time to brainstorm new ideas and find new solutions. And I think the ideas that we presented in the hackathon, we came up in the hackathon, they will help to make the world more glamorous. And I want to thank some supporters too. One is the Immersive Media Lab, which is a project dedicated on storytelling and virtual and augmented reality. I also want to thank you, the Digital Makers Hub, Digital Innovation Hub, who supported us with some working hours, so we could finance a little bit of that, and the FH St. Pölten, who would have been our host, but now is kind of the virtual host. And I cannot say I have 2 highlights, because it was 4 days full of impressions, very different impressions. I also worked within the hackathon. Silvia, again, kudos from my place to especially in the first day, how you handled us like this bunch of people who did not know how to go in the first in the right direction or in a common direction. And yeah, I learned a lot, and it was a great week. And now we earned not only drink our glasses of wine or Marillensaft, but also to go to a weekend and enjoy something outside the virtual world.
May I add something, Franziska? Innovation only comes
Yes,
out
of
of
course.
chaos. Innovation only comes out of chaos. Everything was fine.
Okay, that's it. Thank you.
So we thank the audience for being
Thank
with
you very
us.
much.
And we close the YouTube channel right now.
Have a nice
Thank you.
evening.